Undead and Married is a romantic vampire cozy mystery and is book one in Andy Lowe's Blood Bond Agency series. The series is published by Squabbling Sparrows Press and is also available in ebook and paperback.
Chapter 11. Eva stepped back from the crypt door, her hands trembling with residual energy. This couldn't be happening. She stared at the engravings that covered the door. Outwardly, they were unchanged from earlier. And yet the door had nothing in common with the one she'd opened not more than an hour ago. Unable to accept defeat, she placed her hands back on the crypt door. This time, rather than infusing it with her raw power, she searched for the essence of the metal itself. Not until she closed her eyes and concentrated did she sense the magic that hadn't been there earlier. Or had it? She'd been so busy freaking out about entering the space on her own that her mind wasn't engaged. Had the magic always been there? She wouldn't know. She'd never opened the crypt on her own before. Could it be the magic was thanks to their intruder? She had no way of knowing without speaking to Georgia, and that wasn't happening until her grandmother returned from Greece. It was Georgia who knew all about the protections and spells that shielded the agency, with them in place long before Eva or even her father was born. Could it be the intruder was a witch, not a vampire, as she thought? Or was it a vampire using magic from another, as many of them did, even Georgia? Either way, how on earth was she supposed to trap a witch or a vampire with witchy friends? It had to be a vampire. What would a witch want with the De Silva Chronicle? As if these thoughts weren't doing her head in, she realized she'd have to get Dominik back in to complete another form. Okay, so not the end of the world, with the thought of seeing him again having her body tingling with anticipation. It was as if she could feel his presence already, and despite the inconvenience, had to fight a flutter of excitement at the prospect of his return. Something she's completely lacking enthusiasm over is contacting the Baroness, and telling her she'd have to do likewise. Oh lordy. Unless she told the Baroness, they had denied her application following a credit check. A snort of nervous laughter escaped. It was a shame Angel wasn't in charge of selecting her own mate. Then all Eva would need to do was track down Raphael Bauer and convince him to get himself hitched. Not impossible, with Dee Dee's powers of persuasion being what they were. Eva bit her lip, drawing blood. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to research the man Angel had set her heart on. Or would that be putting her in the same camp as Sebastian? Eva didn't allow herself to dwell on it any longer, sprinting for the stairs and not slowing until she reached the top floor. While she could search herself, there wasn't a chance she would discover as much as Lilith could. And if their resident geek ran true to form, she could even get hold of the human's bank balance and blood type. Could it be the Baroness was as desperate for funds as Eva suspected? If so, she might not be as choosy as she'd been when selecting Beatrice's match. Beggars couldn't be choosers, even when they were undead, especially when they were undead. Immortality meant their funds had to last an awful lot longer. While often asset-rich, a lot of vampires were often out of luck with funds in the bank. It was as well for some that they had access to an all-you-can-eat buffet that didn't charge for the privilege. Fully briefed on what was required, Lilith promised to uncover anything she could. With this one small bit of her life under control, Eva returned to reception. She needed to tell Dee Dee about the latest developments. Yet again, Dee Dee took to swinging around in her office chair while listening to Eva. Apparently, it helped center her thoughts, even if it was rather annoying. Eva preferred peace, quiet, and a lack of movement to put her thoughts in order. Dee Dee stopped spinning to gaze up at Eva. And the energy was magical, you say? Eva nodded out of habit, having answered this question twice already. And not the same as the magic in that special ink Georgia uses? Dee Dee inquired further. Eva gave up pacing and threw herself into the depths of the couch in response. She knew all these questions were Dee Dee's way of thinking things over. However, they only added to Eva's mounting sense of frustration and alarm, making her want to scream. She wasn't hiding it as well as she should, and that became clear when the receptionist exploded. Leave. Go. Concentrate on finding matches for the Count and Angel. You know you can do this blindfolded. So do it. Dee Dee set herself in motion again before adding, I can't think straight with you sitting there fuming." After being put in her place, rather than returning to George's office, Eva took the stairs down to her sleeping chamber. There, she changed out of her tailored business suit and heels into an outfit better suited to her mood. After double-checking the monitor for the camera facing the back alley, she punched in the 12-digit security code and exited. She had to balance her energy, or things would get ugly. Sitting and spinning in an office chair wouldn't help Eva with the problems she was facing. What she needed was to escape the confines of the office and immerse herself in the forest's darkness. As she ran, she inhaled the scent of pine needles and earthy soil. The rasp of her breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot filled her ears. As she passed by the trees, she felt their energy pulsing through her body, revitalizing her. Eva's heart pounded in her chest and sweat trickled down her face, but she kept moving, pushing herself harder and harder. She needed to draw strength from everything around her if she was going to make it through this difficult time. It was a couple of hours before dawn when she returned. Time spent traversing the forest, time spent deep in thought, time to conclude the best way forward. She made straight for the top floor. Lilith should have unearthed a copy of the V-Match software by now. Or at the very least, found information about Raphael Bauer. It was a case of yes and no. No, Lilith hadn't located the matching software despite a search program running in the background. But it was a big fat yes to unearthing the goods on Air Bauer. Eva scanned the printout, whistling through her teeth when she read a juicy snippet. Wow, that's a healthy checking account balance. It was also unusual for someone to have these sorts of funds sitting doing nothing in a bank account. Eva continued scanning, taking notice of anything in red. You're kidding me? This tax refund, is that right? Eva looked up to find Lilith nodding. How can you have that much money in the bank and claim a loss? Even Georgia couldn't manage this. And that was with an accountant who helped write most of the tax laws. That would be because most of his funds are in offshore accounts, Lilith explained. Eva thought about it for only seconds. Is there a chance you can make his funds disappear? For a moment, Eva thought the young woman hadn't heard her. Then she spotted a devious light in the girl's eyes, soon followed by a matching smile. It'll be a complete dawdle. Seeing Eva's look of confusion, she continued, Yep. A piece of cake. She then cracked her knuckles one after the other, before placing her fingertips on the keyboard. Do you want me to transfer them to an interest-bearing account? I don't see why not. If we end up being stiffed by the Baroness on the fee, we may as well cover our basic costs. Anything over and above that, we can donate to charity. Her fingers still flying over the keys, Lilith gave a jerky nod, busy stealing close to $200 million. Instructions received, Lilith's fingers danced manically over the keyboard, the clicking of the keys filling the room as she focused on her task. Eva watched in awe as the young goth, her eyes glued to the computer screen, worked on stealing close to $200 million. If that didn't convince Raphael to at least go on a date with Angel, Eva wasn't sure what would. Let me know when I can move in for the kill. This time, rather than nod, Lilith giggled in response to what was happening on the screen. Chapter 12. 6 o'clock the following night, and Eva's eyes snapped open. She was well rested after sleeping like the dead. Another plus to being a vampire was that insomnia was nigh on impossible. Vampire-born, she could move around during the daylight hours if she wanted. She chose not to, preferring to be in sync with Lilith and Dee to avoid spending time on her own. There was no option but for them to sleep during the day. The sun only had to think about popping over the horizon for them to be dead to the world. They slept until the sun disappeared for another day, at the mercy of whoever or whatever. The idea of being helpless like that was enough to give Eva daymares. Thankfully, if someone or something were to attack her during the day, then they'd regret it in a big way. If she were human, she suspected she would have spent the day tossing and turning, worrying about the challenges the previous night had wrought. Of course, no sooner did she think this than the worry swamped her again, tenfold. She didn't let it overwhelm her though, instead planning her night while dressing for the office. Georgia insisted on corporate attire for anyone working at the agency. She likened it to armor when dealing with some clients, and Eva agreed with this. She'd been dressed in a designer suit when she faced the Baroness and had taken comfort from it. Even more so when she realized the dress the Baroness was wearing was a knockoff. Could it be the woman was still paying for Beatrice's excessive wedding? A final check in the mirror and a tweak to the bow at the neck of her blouse, and Eva was ready to face the night. The first thing she had to do was to check how Lilith was getting on with tracking down the missing software. She also wanted to get an update on the virtual bank heist. It wouldn't be until that was sorted that they could approach Raphael Bauer about meeting Angel. And if his sudden lack of funds didn't convince him, Didi, Lilith, and Eva planned to work on bending his will to theirs. The third item on her to-do list was to phone Dominik Zilonka, something she was conflicted over. If she used her innate ability to find him the perfect life mate, then she would need to be with him. And even more concerning was that they would need to be out and about, where all the single vampires were. That this was likely to get back to Georgia was a straightforward conclusion. The question would be what her grandmother would be angriest about. That she'd been out with a client in a social setting, that it was a Zilonka, or that it was because the Chronicle had been stolen? She hadn't even made it to her office when the bell over the front door tinkled into life. On seeing who their visitor was, she knew her face matched that of Didi, both of them shocked to the core. It would appear Sebastian's threat about the police calling on them wasn't an empty one, after all. Captain Hugo, how pleasant. Didi did nothing to hide her disdain for the local arbiter of law and order. And you've brought reinforcements. How quaint. Quaint wasn't how Eva would describe the two Neanderthals at attention on either side of the captain. Sure, she and Didi could take care of them without breaking a sweat, but not right now. With everything else that was going on, it was best to keep a low profile around the captain, especially with the theft of the Chronicle and the ongoing murders. Eva took her lead from the receptionist, her own greeting when she acknowledged the captain and his deputies, also lacking in enthusiasm. They had good reason, with the police chief being a complete waste of space. If he were as keen on working as he was in taking backhanders, the residents would be a lot safer. Oblivious to their combined scorn, the captain barked out, "We're here to see Georgia." His second mistake was making a beeline for her office. This, more than anything, showed he was watching their movements from across the square. But he wasn't getting a free run tonight, with Didi jumping to her feet and planting herself dead in front of him. Not casually either, but with hands on hips and her top lip curled back in a snarl. Even without her fangs on show, the captain staggered back. "My grandmother is not in the office at present." Eva walked over to stand next to Didi, also looking him square in the eye. "May I help you?" Despite not wanting to help him at all, she had to keep up appearances. "Where is she?" Again, there was nothing polite about the police chief's question, and Eva couldn't help but bristle in response. This nasty little man needed to learn some manners. But that lesson would have to wait. Eva made the most of Captain Hugo's audacity in trying to stare her down by swamping him with energy, filling his mind with what she wanted from him. That being, for him to vamoose back to the other side of the square and leave the blood bond agency alone. A gentle cough from Didi had Eva glancing to the side, to see the receptionist shaking her head, although not enough to show to anyone else. Eva clawed her way out of Hugo's mind before responding to him, as if the room hadn't fallen silent for 20 seconds. "My grandmother is out at present, Captain. Perhaps I can be persuaded to help?" Hugo blinked at her before responding. Yes. That would be good." Eva walked over and opened the door to George's office, showing he should enter. He did so, but when the two goons made to follow him, they found their way barricaded by Didi and Eva. The men looked ready to push them aside when, out of nowhere, Lilith popped up behind them, her hands resting on the back of their thick necks. "Please take a seat on the couch while I get you refreshments." There was nothing subtle about her manipulation of their minds or their bodies, but they complied. Despite being a vampire for only 6 years, Lilith was a quick study. When Didi set about reinforcing the manipulation, the two men didn't stand a chance. This left the captain to Eva. It would make a change for the odds to be in her favor. Not until he had a cup of coffee did he get on with his questions. Only 2 in, and Eva knew where this was heading. part of her wasn't surprised the captain had suspicions about the blood bond agency and its clientele. It was a shame the same couldn't be said for Love Bites, and yet another reason to suspect Sebastian was behind this visit. Fortunately, Eva could answer the captain's questions truthfully and without hesitation. Not a problem when she was telling the truth, but tricky when she was lying through her fangs. The captain had run out of questions when Eva voiced one of her own. "And tell me, Captain, did you also visit Sebastian Draco over at Love Bites?" Again, he went all spacey on her, looking even more mentally challenged than usual. "Love Bites?" He shook his head in confusion. "I'm sorry? Where is that?" Eva didn't push it any further for fear something in that tiny brain of his would overheat. She already knew what she needed to. How she dealt with it would depend on her meeting with the delectable Dominik. "You'll leave. You have what you came for." Eva allowed her eyes to turn full black, her words hypnotic. The combination was potent enough that the captain swayed in the visitor's chair. "I'll leave. I have what I came for." His response was a monotone, his actions are robotic. Perhaps it was the act of moving, but a spark of sanity returned to his eyes along with confusion. It was obvious he didn't remember getting to his feet. "Thank you for your help, Captain. If we hear of anything at all, we'll get in touch. We're so much safer with you and your men looking out for us." As tempting as it would be to further embellish the situation, Eva stopped where she was. It was enough to satisfy the small-minded man. Far better he left thinking he'd promised to protect them than harboring thoughts they were hiding something from him. Of interest, on escorting the captain back into reception, was finding his goons close to drooling out both sides of their mouths. Lilith and Didi had done a real number on the pair. The three men stumbled out onto the sidewalk, where Didi gently pointed them toward the police station. It was better than them wandering off in a daze and getting lost. Back in her office, Eva watched through the window as they weaved their way across the square. They hadn't even made it as far as the fountain in the middle when Sebastian intercepted them. This, more than anything, confirmed it was Sebastian who had set the police on them. Without his interference, they'd stick to parking fines and misdemeanors rather than involving themselves in actual detective work. Anything that required them to exert effort seemed to be off the cards. This couldn't all be attributed to her latest rejection of Sebastian, could it? Thankfully, the men, still being dazed and confused, had the lies Sebastian spouted going in one ear and out the other. The only thing she couldn't tell from this far away was whether he was focusing on her, the agency, or both. Didi joined her, and the pair of them stared out into the dark. "My money is on Sebastian or one of his clients being behind the murders." Eva nodded. "I think you're right. And it would appear it's up to us to find the murderer before I'm framed any further." Eva crossed her arms as she watched Sebastian storm back inside Love Bites. Or at least help the police enough that they can take care of it themselves. "I agree. What I don't get, though, is the murdering bit. You don't have to kill to enjoy dinner." Didi swung to face Eva. "Unless you're newly turned. If what the newspaper says is true, the bodies haven't been messed up enough for that to be the case." Eva tapped her teeth, deep in thought. "He's up to something, though. I just don't know what." Lilith joined them, standing on Eva's other side. "You want me to check into Draco's background? See what I can dig up?" Eva tilted her head in the Welsh vampire's direction. "Good idea, but no actual digging. That always freaks the villagers out in a big way."
If you've enjoyed these chapters, we'd love it if you could give them a thumbs up. And if you'd like to continue the story, you can subscribe and tap the bell to be notified when the next chapter is released.